Part 2 of my Piers Morgan and all the other people like him video. Okay, so we were talking about the ability to go out with an AR-15 and hunt with it. I mean an AK-47 and hunt with it. You can go out with an AK-47 in Virginia, in many states like it, and hunt with it. And I covered this in my previous video about cost, availability, and the fact that it in a lot of ways is not as bulky than a modern sporting rifle. Now, you'll say, well, it doesn't have any defensive purposes, or how come you have to have the ability for high-capacity magazines? Think about it for a second. Let's say that hunter only was allowed, that farmer that we were talking about in the other video, was only allowed to have 10-round magazines. And he wakes up in the middle of the night, or he's sitting on his porch, and he sees a coyote that's 500 yards across this property. The AR-15 has the ability to reach out and touch that coyote, but he's only limited to 10 rounds. He would have a much better chance if he had multiple magazines available with higher amounts of ammunition. That way, he doesn't run out of his 10 rounds and say, shoot, I gotta go into the house, go down in the basement, grab another magazine, load it up, and by that time my cow's already dead. The same thing goes with the AK-47. The AK-47 would have a greater chance if a hunter wanted to go out with a higher capacity magazine and hunt with it. Typical sporting rifles only hold 5 rounds in it, and they're bolt action, and they have a higher kick as far as recoil, and you have a scope that you have to worry about. With an AK-47, you already have a definite sight picture, iron sights. You could add a scope to it, but if you have a 10 round, and they do make 15 rounds and 20 round magazines, that means you have more of a chance of follow-up shots in case you do miss. Now, most hunters are going to be a little bit more clean with their work because they don't want to destroy the meat, but if you're somebody who this is your livelihood, you don't care about the pelt being damaged, you don't care about the backside of the back end, the other side of the deer being destroyed, you just need the meat to feed your family. Those follow-up shots may mean the difference between food for my family for the next month or no food for my family for the next month. That's why. Now then you're going to say, well, there's no legitimate defensive purpose against human beings. Piers, let me ask you something. Have you ever even fired an AR-15? Have you even ever fired an AK-47 or any gun for that matter? Have you ever fired any of these quote-unquote assault rifles? Have you even held one? Have you ever had one explained to you? Have you ever had a qualified military, police, or hey, even a gun shop person explain to you an AR-15 or an AK-47 or any other guns like it? In my opinion, my humble opinion, I think that an M1 Garand, which is a World War II rifle, an M1 Garand would be more deadly than an AR-15 or an AK-47. Why? Accuracy and sheer stopping power. Have you ever heard of all of the instances over in Iraq where we have shot at people with an AR-15 and they just keep on coming? But that one soldier that lost his M16 or AR-15 and picked up an AK-47 and shot once or twice and the guy died. Now the AR-15 has a defensive use and the AK-47 have a defensive use. Why? Because they're ready to go. They're simple and cheap in a lot of cases and easy to maintain. And a lot of people buy them not because they're afraid of a home invasion. A lot of people buy them because they're afraid of you. They're afraid of you. They're afraid of you, Piers Morgan, and they're afraid of everybody like you. They're afraid of the government, and they're afraid of this, what could happen if the Second Amendment or the Constitution were to be trampled upon. They're afraid of the world going, or the United States going to hell in a handbasket and not being able to have a foothold to defend themselves. Because when the chips are down, when society collapses, you don't obey a law. You obey the natural law of man and God, or whatever religion you are. You obey the fact that you need to feed yourself, protect yourself, feed your family, and protect your family and your loved ones. And no amount of law and no amount of government and no amount of person is going to prevent you from doing that. If Virginia magically became a state that said no more carry, no more open carry, and no more concealed carry, if I had to obey that law, and the day ever came where I was about ready to be killed, guess what? I would do everything in my power to defend my life, because it is my life. Nobody is going to say that, well, Jason, you didn't have a gun on you, but you picked up a rock and you beat the man to death that had a gun pointed at you. Even though the man was a criminal and had a rap sheet a mile long and was a cocaine addict and would have never benefited to anything in society, we're taking you to jail because you protected yourself with a rock. Guess what? It's the law of man. It's the law of human nature. It's the law of my God-given right to defend my life and the life of somebody else I care for. And nobody, no amount of law, no amount of legislation, no amount of ban, no amount of government, no amount of nothing is going to prevent me from doing that. I've already been mugged as a human being. I was mugged when I was 21 years old. I was in Richmond. I was hanging out with my friends. They went into a store. I didn't want to go into that store. And hey, guess what? This was the safest place in Richmond, as apparently the people say. Carytown. So I didn't want to go into that store. So I waited outside. Just like a movie. Just like in a movie. I was walking down the street and I got pulled into an alleyway and held up at knife point by some white dude who was cracked out beyond his belief. Guess what? And the police never caught him. But you know what I was left with? A little bit of nicks on my neck and mental scarring from being mugged. I don't want to let anybody get put through that just because of legislation. Bottom line is, banning these guns and banning these magazines will do nothing but bad. And my advice to you, Piers Morgan, and my advice to everybody else like you, and to all the politicians, from the small senators all the way up to the White House, my advice to you is go out and look and investigate and shoot and handle and maybe have somebody explain to you what you're trying to ban before you ban it. That's like somebody saying, sex is bad, we need to outlaw sex. Well, it's bad in the case of underage sex and rape, but a man and a woman together, it's a beautiful and passionate experience. Consenting man and woman. That's like saying, let's ban sex. Well, guess what? Maybe you go out and have sex, and then you'll be like, wow, sex is awesome. I'm not going to ban that. You're going to change your vote. It's the same thing. Ah!